Welcome back to the Magic Sponge podcast, a miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien Sini. I'm the guy behind NRL Physio and all you see on social media. Co-host James, mate, you're in. It is a good week to be a Queenslander, apart from a few results on Saturday, but the Finns got the bye, so collected the 2 points. But, mate, we got through Origin 1. Obviously, you know, the send-off kind of, I guess, put a bit of a fizzer on the game as an overall spectacle. But, look, if you're a Queenslander, you take the win, wouldn't you?
100%. The win is a win is a win. And, geez, I've heard some dribbly takes after this whole send-off fiasco. So hopefully we don't have to spend too much time going in there tonight, Brian, because I have questioned some people's brain development after hearing some of the absolute dross through the media in, was it a send-off, was it not a send-off? I think we just need to look forward to better things from that. But I think, the men's game was, decided by Queensland, but that, in my opinion, was fair enough. The women's game was a belter as well. Field goal in the last minute, 1 point win, Queensland spirit, if you don't mind, getting a run in there again. They're all things that you like to see on your Origin bingo card, Brian. So I was really, 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 really into that. So it sets up really good game too down in Melbourne, the men's, but also game 3 in Townsville for the women. It's going to be box office. I can't wait. It's going to be good.
Yeah, mate. Friend of the show, Sienna Lafipo, started at 13 for the Maroons women's, and most tackle busts from the Maroons. She had 5 tackle busts and made the last run to set up the field goal as well. Little tackle bust there and got on her front and nice quick play the ball. So shout out to Sienna because that was very impressive. I was very, very happy for her.
Definition of Queensland spirit, Sienna. So shout out, 100%.
And I think the send-off thing, like, once again, we won't get too far into it because I just think it's very hard to get balanced takes on anything when it comes to Origin. Like, from what I've seen in the few bits of content that I've sort of put up about it, like, it's the perfect mixture, I think, of like State of Origin just bringing out that rank tribalism in people, but then also you mix that with the game's gone soft crowd as well. So you've got like this amalgamation of just so much passion for your state, whether you're a Queenslander or a New South Welshman. And then you've also got like the game has gone soft thing. And it's like fuel on a flame. It just blows it up. So yeah, we won't dip too much into that. We'll talk about the injury around Reece Walsh and all that kind of stuff. I think we'll stick to the injuries because otherwise we'll be here all night, I think, especially as 2 Queenslanders talking about that. Guys, we are on YouTube now. Please head on over there, subscribe, give us a review, thumbs up. You know why you're here. You get all the injury news. We loop it back to SuperCoach and Fantasy, talk about, likely recovery times, on-field performance, and re-injury risk as well. If you get value out of this content, patreon.com/NRL Physio is where you want to go to get more of it. I do all my stuff over there. We had a really good chat about Tommy Flegler over the last couple of days and what he was sort of facing. So a lot of what we'll talk about now is covered probably even in, I guess earlier and more depth over on Patreon. But yeah, otherwise let's get into the injury wrap from round 14 and State of Origin 1.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing.
He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I mean, I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Wrap up incoming from State of Origin to begin with, Brian. So out of this game, Reece Walsh is the obvious one here, ruled out with concussion in this game. The other ones of concern for the Blues were Liam Martin with a foot concern. He was in a moon boot after the game and he didn't back up for the Panthers. Dylan Edwards with a quad. He was ruled out pre-game. And then Reece Robson with a neck injury. The only other person of interest here was Murray Taulagi from the Maroons. I think his was like a shoulder AC type mechanism there for Murray Taulagi. Who do you want to talk to first from the Origin boys? You want to go straight into Reece Walsh, Brian? Is that where you want to kick things off?
Oh, let's get rid of the other ones because I think they're all fairly minor. So Reece Robson just had a bit of a neck burner, apparently. They would have played him if it wasn't a short turnaround. Murray Taulagi, they said they could have needled him up and played him through it. So just something to keep an eye on with those AC joint injuries. They can aggravate a little bit over the next couple of weeks. Dylan Edwards with the quad injury, it is a minor strain. He's a good chance to play this week, but no certainty. So the re-injury risk for these quads is quite low. They don't tend to hang around, linger around too much when they're good to go. They're pretty good to go. So I would start him with confidence if he is named this week. But even if he isn't named this week, if I was Madge Maguire, I wouldn't be afraid to name him and play him, because that'll be sort of 3.5 weeks since he suffered it. And for a minor quad issue, be very rare for it to hang around that long. And I would say he'll be fine to sort of, get into the squad and get into training from the start. Liam Martin has strained a flexor tendon underneath his big toe. So kind of similar to like a turf toe-y kind injury. Very rarely do guys miss a lengthy amount of time for that. You're usually looking at somewhere in that 2 to 4 week range. He is apparently hoping to be back this weekend, which would be, kind of best case scenario, really. But once again, even if he's not back this weekend, I wouldn't be afraid to kind of name him and try and get him up for the second game, which would be 3 weeks post injury. It'll just affect his push off a little bit. Like you get a bit of pain, but once again, they needle those ones up pretty well and get guys through it. So he should be okay. The big ticket item from the week, the thing that I think ran my phone battery dry that many times from, just like people going bonkers about Reece Walsh and his concussion. So I think we'll just cover off on what is going on with Reece to start with. At the end of the day, it is as serious or, to be treated like every other concussion that's happened this year. So he had category 1 signs. So he was knocked unconscious. You could see he, lost consciousness, and he had what we call a fencing response. That's where the upper limbs go really tense. So his fingers were sticking out really tensely. That is a sure sign that a player has suffered a concussion. So when those signs, those category 1 signs exist, that player is automatically ruled out for the game at that point. So he then will have to miss the 11 days, because once category 1 signs of concussion are shown, 11-day stand down automatically, which means that he missed the week just gone, and he will miss this weekend as well, because I think this weekend is 10 days post Origin for him, so he will miss the 2 games. He then went in to the sheds, and it is standard protocol amongst the NRL for the medical staff to then perform, because the HIA, and where the confusion came around this is obviously on the coverage, Danica Mason said, friend of the show, Danica Mason, of course, said that he had passed his HIA in the sheds. And mate, I could grab that many sound bites from the discussions that we've had over the time about how frustrating all of this category 1 versus category 2 just ridiculousness is, in terms of not only treating concussions differently depending on their initial symptoms, but B, just the confusion that it brings amongst players, coaches, fans, commentators, journalists, everyone. Because this is your prime example of, yes, he suffered a concussion. He went in, completed the full head injury assessment, which is, you've got balance, you've got recall, cognition, all these kind of testing things that they do in the sheds, which for somebody who has had category 2 signs, so we're not completely sure that he's had a concussion. The reason that they then go in and do those tests is to see if that player can come back on. That is not why they're doing those tests on somebody who has already suffered a clear concussion, who has already been knocked out. They are doing that for the patient or the athlete's care at that point. They are trying to assess where Reece Walsh's brain function is at that point in time. Is he, completely out of it? Does he remember what's going on? And that can give them information on, do we need to, go further with this? Do we need to take him to hospital? Look, subjective tests or more subjective tests like this aren't the greatest markers. I'm not denying that at all. They're not the best way to assess these kind of issues, but that is the NRL's protocol. That is the way that and many sports, the guidelines, these guidelines come from international sports symposiums. That's where the NFL, AFL, NRL, all these kind of sports get them from. As I said, not saying they're the best things ever, but that is the way it is to be done. So there was nothing untoward done. That is exactly how Reece Walsh should be treated, with the utmost care. Do that assessment to see where his brain functions at, but also to give them a baseline. And it's not a baseline people sort of said, oh, but he had a baseline in the preseason. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a baseline post-concussion, because then on day 2, day 3, day 4, you can repeat that testing and be like, okay, is he getting better from that day 1, or is he getting worse? And once again, if you compare this to like a muscular injury, anything like that, like we're testing people on day 1. If someone comes in with a hamstring injury, I'm testing their strength to see where they're at. And then I will test again and again and again to see if they're improving. It's no different than that concept, because Reece Walsh the next day started suffering headaches. So he regressed. Hopefully he is now improving, obviously, but that can happen with concussions. So I think it's really important to note that when you hear this, oh, he had category 1 signs, but he passed his HIA, hopefully the TV commentators will be a little bit more careful now about that, because they should really be saying he failed his HIA, because the first question of the HIA effectively is, did he show clear signs of concussion? If the answer is yes, he's gone, he's failed that HIA, but he was symptom-free with all of his testing in the sheds. Doesn't mean he's passed anything. He has not passed any kind of testing. He has just been symptom-free and shown good mental acuity, recognition, memory, all those kind of things in the sheds. That's all that means. So that's the main thing with that. I think the other thing to point out, and Hindy, as much as I love him, sort of said last night, oh, you saw Reece Walsh post-game. That means he was fine. It wasn't that big a deal. The tackle wasn't that bad. And I just really have to emphasize again that how significant the blow to the head is not indicative of how severe that concussion is. How severe the symptoms are when the player first suffers that concussion, that's not indicative either. We had Michael Cheekham, who had convulsions on the field, was absolutely horrible. I think he was back in about 3-4 weeks. You've got someone like Ryan Madison, who copped a little knock to his head, and he's still out 6 weeks later. So that what it appears like, and the, I guess, the traumatic nature of it at the start, concussion is so varied. So don't judge it on how you see it. And the main reason I say that is not to downplay a concussion like Walsh's, because obviously it should be treated as a significant injury because it's a brain injury. It's more when you see these innocuous ones, you don't treat them as lesser. And then the last thing I'll say, I've ranted on for about 10 minutes now. The last thing I'll say, where the confusion has come with other players suffering category 1 signs, but then because they passed their HIA in the sheds, they've been able to play the next week. I've done a lot of air quotes there for those not watching on YouTube. But effectively what has happened is they have been deemed category 1 by the independent doctor. So the independent doctor has said, I saw clear signs of concussion. The club doctor has said, I disagree with that. I don't think they were clear. I think they were category 2, which is unclear, possible signs of concussion. I, as the club doctor, have then taken him into the sheds. He has, gone through all his testing with flying colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge that there was even a concussion to begin with. And that's how they have then, like with a guy like Sam Walker, who they said, it was just a neck injury, and that's how he's passed. That's how Sam Walker was able to play the next week. So it was a disagreement between the independent doctor and the club doctor. That's how that came about. There was no way anyone was disagreeing with Reece Walsh's situation there. Sorry for ending, James, but have I missed anything? I think the whole Category 1 thing, the interesting thing I didn't speak to you about during the week was it's not just a thing in NRL, because I'm sure you're aware of the few cases. I think there was Tua with his, he had a knee injury in inverted commas, where they said, oh, no, it wasn't concussion. He was stumbling around because he had a knee injury. And then I think it was Cam Newton a couple of years ago had he said he got rubber pellets in his eyes or something. So it's not just the NRL where this happens. It happens in other sports too.
Yeah, the only other thing I want to add in, because I suppose the assumption is that Reece Walsh will be right for game 2. I don't think you can guarantee that until you know that he's got through the protocols. And I think what's worth keeping in mind as well is that Billy Slater has shown a proclivity to choosing a team that's fit and healthy and ready to rock for that week of prep leading into the game. So hypothetically, I'm just maybe putting this out there. I don't know Reece's situation, where that's at, or Billy's thinking either, but it probably begs a question to say, well, he's going to miss, miss the round just being, he's going to miss round 15 for the Broncos. He would potentially be going into camp prior to State of Origin 2 without any footy. So, is it a guarantee that he's going to get selected or not? Like, I think on the surface, you think, yeah, Reece Walsh, he's gone, like he's going to get selected, but he's also going to get through these protocols. He's also going to go into game 2 with no other footy under his belt. And I think in the past, Billy's shied away from picking guys who were on the fence, maybe. So hopefully for Queensland's sake and Reece Walsh's sake, that's very, very clear that he's going to be good, right, and ready for game 2. And I guess Queensland already have that game in the bag, Brien. So they probably could say, well, really, we don't need to risk this guy for game 2. He's had, this is his second concussion this year as well. Maybe we keep him in the bank for game 3 at Queensland. I think that's just not a guarantee. And I don't want to sort of stoke the fires here and make it like a tinfoil hat sort of, conundrum type situation. But I just think there's enough there that would make me think, well, it's not a guarantee, is it? Like, I don't think we should be sort of counting our eggs and counting them that Reece Walsh will definitely line up in game 2. Is that a fair call?
Yeah, I think the point that you make there that's most interesting is that second, and I'm going to say second heavy knock to the head, because I saw it like you said, second concussion a lot this year, a lot this week. But if you remember rightly, that was that really weird situation that we had a red hot crack about, where it was like he went back in after the hit from Taylor May. He passed his HIA, but they kept him off because he had like blurred vision. And they said, no, that blurred vision is because he's got an eye injury, not a
which wasn't a fracture, Brien, either. Like they said, oh no, all good, no fracture. So that whole situation was a little bit how you going as well.
Mate,
how that went down was really bizarre. So he's been like, I feel for Reece because he's been involved in these 2 big media coverage situations. And I guess it comes with the territory with him as a player. We get that. But my God, I'm sure he's sick of probably hearing his name associated with this stuff. It'd be pretty frustrating, I think.
Yeah, and I think, but that is the thing, is that effectively it would have been brain trauma, right? Like that hit from Taylor May would have caused brain trauma. Whether you want to diagnose it as a concussion or not, it's significant brain trauma. And then he's got this one as well. So it is his second sort of significant brain injury or trauma to the brain in a short space of time. So that is where, yeah, it is no guarantee that he's back for game 3. And I think purely like that would exist if it was his first time concussion, because as we've spoken about, concussions can be quite varied no matter what. But yeah, I do think the fact it's his second in quick succession, there's just no guarantees at this point in time. It is something that it is up in the air.
Yeah, I think Billy Slater's the one in there as well. He could be, if any coach is going to do it, he may well be inclined to go, you know what, we need to just put this team out here for game 2, and Reece, I just want you to get right for game 3 potentially. I just think that's the other wild card in the situation. Anyway, we move off for Reece Walsh. Everyone's probably eyes are glazing over from us talking ad nauseum about him, and he's been in the media all the time. So from round 14, Brien, we're going to talk HIA. Solomon Alaimalo from the West Tigers, Remis Smith, Josh Curran, and Bailey Haywood are all going to enter protocols. Any specific updates on any of those players particularly? I guess the 2 Bulldogs boys have the bye. So they're probably more likely for round 16. Anything else you wanted to add from those couple of players?
No, I think the only one was Remis Smith. It wasn't said specifically whether his was category 1 or category 2, but I think you're pretty safe in assuming he failed it because he stayed down for a long time and he seemed to like lose his balance kind of even when he was on his haunches a little bit. So I think he was in a fair bit of trouble. So I would be surprised if he is right for next week.
Rightio. Dragons vs Tigers was first game that we need to talk to, Brien. Injuries as this one, all concerning the Tigers who, really need more injuries like a kick in the dick at the moment. So Alex Twal with a foot injury. Lachlan Galvin's been a hand fracture, which is sort of blown up on social media for a few bizarre reasons there with his management. Jayden Sullivan has been, I think, reported as a finger fracture, and Justin Olam with a knee concern, Brien. Do you want to speak to our favourite friend of the show, Alex Twal, to start off with foot concern, what we're thinking in that space?
Mate, I have some wonderful news on the Alex Twal front. He has been cleared of serious injury, which is wonderful. I haven't had time. It's one of those things where I've been at work all day while all of New South Wales has been on holiday. Thanks, Queensland. But I just didn't get time to post about that. But that is, very excellent news for my boy Twali. And he's been playing good footy lately too. Like, that's not just me with Rose. Yeah,
he's a good player. Like, my God.
Mate, I'd take him in the fins in a heartbeat, especially with Tommy Flegler's situation, which we'll talk about soon. But so cleared of serious injury. Jayden Sullivan, broken finger, 3 to 4 week return to play usually. Justin Olam has an ongoing knee issue. He missed the start of the season with it. He's been carrying it since Storm days even. So he's been getting PRP injections, which is platelet-rich plasma. It's like kind of an injection that's supposed to try and help healing effectively. A bit of mixed reports depending on where you inject that PRP. But yeah, he's dealing with an ongoing thing that, he might need like cleanup or keyhole surgery for to kind of go in and clean the knee up a little bit, which would be like a 4 to 6 week kind of recovery period. So there could be a bit of an issue for them in the 3/4 line. The interesting one here from both an injury perspective and I guess a SuperCoach perspective is Lachlan Galvin. So he's been playing through this hand injury, which was reported as a fracture. I think the reports effectively came from his manager reading the, I think it was via Wide World of Sport. And they sort of said, we've been speaking to his manager who says it's a fracture and he's been getting painkilling injections. The Tigers came out and said, no, it's not a fracture. But effectively, at the end of the day, he's got a hand or wrist injury. He's been getting painkilling injections to play through that injury. And it all came to the, the climax when there was allegedly a few burners on Twitter going around and commenting on all of my stuff about Lachlan Galvin, saying, he needs to leave this club behind. Can't believe they're playing him through a hand fracture. All this kind of stuff. Just like, I think you said off air, like just the rugby league, like soap opera. It is hard in effect here because then it's like he's asked for a release. He wants to go to Penrith or whatever, or the Roosters, I don't even know. But effectively, from an injury perspective, I think the interesting thing here is that he's been playing through a hand injury. Whether it's a fracture or it's a ligament injury, whatever it is, over that month that he's been playing with that injury, a couple of things can happen. Number one, it could slowly be getting better. It could slowly be healing. So having this week off this week, it could just be, we just need to give him a week or two off to get that last little bit of healing, and then he's going to be okay. It could also be that he's been doing further damage to it over that time, potentially, and then he might need 4 to 6 weeks off to kind of settle it down. So I think at the moment, it's been phrased as a rest, but I just, that's not a guarantee, I think is what I would say with that. So I am a Galvin owner. I'm pretty heavily considering selling him this week or next week if he's not named. James, hit me with your takes, A, on the I know you're a big fan of this particular player manager because he's the player manager of your favourite Manly Sea Eagles coach, but then also how you would approach Lachlan Galvin from a SuperCoach perspective.
So it's an interesting one, firstly, because they had the bye last week. So you'd think the reason for him needing another rest doesn't necessarily add up there unless he's exacerbated it in game. So I don't really understand that. Part of me thinks there's this whole media shitstorm around him requesting a release. He's 10 games into his career. I guess the player manager is not necessarily been highly regarded, depending on what you read in NRL circles at certain clubs with certain teams in the past. I think there's been perceived issues via the Broncos when Seabold was there, bringing in, I think it was like 14 of the top 17 were under this player manager, and how that all sort of ended up. So, a lot of smoke, a lot of fire, a lot of bizarre commentary from um, single name accounts with 10 digits after them, which was always a little bit suspicious when you look into what a burner account would look like. I mean, it's not like your Homer disappearing into the trees as the meme indicates. It's fairly obvious it might be someone that has a connection there. And if that's the case, allegedly, like, that is really funny. That's just really, really funny. Like, when I saw people take screenshots and be like, this is probably a player manager that's doxing this account and ragging on the West Tigers from an anonymous Twitter account. I mean, that's very good. It's very funny. And I don't know. It's just the West Tigers, Brien, isn't it? That's the other thing, is like, man, you got to feel for the Tigs. It seems like this doesn't happen at other clubs, but take it to the West Tigers and they'll find a way. They'll find a way to create a shitstorm for themselves. It's a strange one. In terms of what I do with Lachlan Galvin, I'm holding. I think coming off the bye, he's going to have this week off. There's very few hand fractures that I can think of that would sit down for more than 3 or 4 weeks unless they're really, really nasty. So given that the West Tigers don't miss a game between now and round 26, I just hope he can be a number for me round 16, round 19, probably especially. So if he's not there round 16, I might move him next round. As it stands, I'm probably holding, I think, would be my lean at the present. But just because their bye coverage is so good, he plays so many games. He's been rock solid as well. Like, he's been scoring really, really well. So even before round 13, their bye, he's pumping out, like, I think he had 79 and a 90. They've got a reasonable draw as well, although they are going terribly. But I think you can make a case for keeping hold of Lachlan Galvin there from a SuperCoach point of view, would be my thinking, unless you want to just go hard and go to a bigger dog there in the halves. Titans vs Rabbitohs, Brien, is going to be the next one we're going to talk about. Only Siliva Havili from this one. Very obvious mechanism here from a calf point of view. He was coming off the back fence on a kickoff, pulled up even before contact and got carried off the field. So we're probably looking at a high-grade calf injury there. He had the compression on, so he might have been even managing something in the lead up to this game, Brien, but didn't look good for his prognosis for sure, did it?
Yeah, I think that's probably the interesting part of this. He had that compression on there, so he's probably carrying some sort of niggle there to start with. It's going to be, you would assume, at least a moderate to high grade calf injury. Best case 3 to 4 weeks, potentially 6+ weeks. It's just, it's an interesting one with all the soft tissue injuries we've been seeing so far this year. Guys play through stuff every week, don't get me wrong, but I would have thought Siliva Havili probably wasn't somebody that they potentially, necessarily needed to play through a niggle. Was just probably the most interesting component of that. But yeah, he'll be missing for multiple weeks now, unfortunately.
Cowboys vs Warriors, another one who's a friend of the show here, Jordan McLean. We mention him every second week, I think. Calf injury, he was a pre-game rule out there, Brien. Have we heard much in terms of grading for Jordan McLean?
He's a chance to come back this week. And once again, mate, you could rinse and repeat this exact statement that I'm about to say with Jordan McLean, but I think he has to have some pretty rank lower back issues, because he just has these calf hamstring issues like constantly that rule him out for a game, and then he comes back the next week, and then 2 weeks later he's got another one. So potentially it's more like a referred pain or some neural tightness coming from his lower back than anything. But yeah, like, expect probably at least another 2 or 3 of these for Jordan McLean over the rest of the season, because they just keep happening.
Broncos vs Sharks was the next one. So Teig Wilton was ruled out pre-game with an AC joint injury. I didn't see much in terms of specific grade in there for Teig Wilton, but Siva Talakai looked really good in his place there from a super coach perspective. And if he's a high grade AC, Siva Talakai roars into, I guess, consideration for your team. And the other one, I guess, from the eyeball here, Brian, this wasn't reported, but Kotoni Staggs had his knee taped for what looked like a PCL complaint. And then he landed knee first in like the 70th-ish minute and went off the field with what looked like a PCL type mechanism. I would be, as a Broncos owner, I'm not a Broncos owner, as a Broncos enthusiast and a Supercoach rosterer, I would be a bit concerned about Kotoni Staggs. So I would be looking to move on if you're a Supercoach owner. What do you think about Kotoni to start with here, Brian? He's probably the interesting one out of that game.
Yeah, I had the video all clipped up and ready to go when he went off, and I was exactly the same as you. I thought PCL straight away. He did come back on, so it was something I think we had our lovely wives away this weekend for Mum's Magic Round, so rolling solo at home. So, yeah, I thought, not really something I wanted to put in time to do when, he came back onto the field, but it's definitely something we can chat about now in terms of I just think moving forward gives me concern for his performance. And he definitely seems he was ruled out with that rib issue a couple of weeks ago, whether there was, I think the knee injury, potentially you're our tinfoil hatter around here, so you could potentially talk to that a little bit more. I will just quickly say on Teig Wilton, there has been no clarification from the Sharks at all on his AC joint. So what I'll say is it's going to be a grade 2 or a grade 3 because there's no way for a grade 1 that they're this cagey about it, you would assume. So grade 2 or grade 3, most are back in that 2 to 4 week range. So it means he's a chance for this week, but it could be up to a month. So I know that doesn't give you much, but unfortunately, the Sharks have just given us nothing on that. So it's hard to say, but that's about probably as accurate as I can be, is that 2 to 4 week return to play. Mate, Staggs with the knee, there could be some ducks and drakes going on here.
Tinfoil on head at the present, Brian. I wonder if there was a little bit of smoke screen going on here from Red Hill, whether there was actually a rib injury or rib concern and he had to sort of sit that week, or whether there was a PCL that he's been managing and playing through, because the PCL was for sure taped up and the mechanism was pretty consistent for it. I would think this would probably preclude Kotoni from Origin consideration if this is something that he's managing. So I think if you're someone who thinks, maybe Kotoni's a shout for the Blues, I doubt it personally. And I think this might be one that you may well see him sit down a little bit for the Broncos as well. So I think in terms of the Bronx draw, they play 16, I believe, but they miss 19, I think, is how they play out. So he may well miss a game or two here or there, but like we sort of said in previous podcasts and previous weeks, there hasn't been a huge amount of good source come out of the Broncos regarding injuries. Adam Reynolds was a classic. Payne Haas, we still have no idea about what happened there. Tristan Sailor even came back really quickly from a Cindy surgery. There's been a lot of stuff going on there out of the Bronx that, I guess is very hard to get a good glean on. So I guess keep an eye on Kotoni with the knee. That's the insight from the Magic Sponge over here with me and you, Brian. So we'll go on to the Storm Knights. Out of this game, David Armstrong was a pre-game rule-out with a quad concern, and Jack Cogger was a groin injury. David Armstrong, I haven't seen what they're thinking here, Brian, whether it's a sort of a low-grade injury there or a contact injury. Any update?
They haven't specified on whether it was a strain or a cork, but they said he's a chance for next week. So him, I didn't put in the run sheet, Daniel Saifidi as well with his knee issue. So apparently they're both a chance to return next week. It's a real conundrum they've got there because they got Fletcher Sharp, who came in on the weekend and looked really good too. So there's a bit of, I'm a David Armstrong owner and I'm holding on for dear life around 19, hoping that he gets a run. It definitely isn't something that'll keep him out beyond round 17, 18. So if he's still in favour for round 19, he could be there for us. Jack Cogger, I just wanted to mention with the groin because he didn't play the full game and he was clutching at his groin at times throughout the game. There was no reported injury, but just something to keep an eye on.
Panthers versus Sea Eagles here. Haumole Olakau'atu was a calf injury here, Brian. So we don't know, I guess, the severity of this. Probably the big talking point for myself and yourself as enthusiasts would be a 4-try effort from our favourite super coach, breakout superstar, Thomas Talau. That's probably the big talking point out of this. But we can talk calves first. Let's talk about calf injuries first, because I'm going to slurp Tommy Talau for a little bit after that.
and deservedly so. Olakau'atu, I can cover this really quickly. It was minor. They said they could have brought him back on if they really, really wanted to, but they just didn't want to risk further injury. The one thing I will say about calves is even though it's minor, it can linger around. So it's something, once again, Madge has spoken a lot about not wanting to take guys into camp if they're not 100%, even though he did it with Nico. I just wonder whether this might, for a guy who was a bench forward, does that count against him? Because, yeah, it could be that it's still lingering around in a few weeks. Hit me with Tommy Talau, mate. What a call. It's coming off where it looked a bit dicey to start with when he nearly dislocated his ankle, I think, in his first game. But, yeah, he's doing well now.
Well, it didn't start well, Brien, because he didn't get named for round 1. So that was really looking bad for me. I would have started with him at the start of the year, but anyway. I haven't actually taken my own advice, and I don't roster him in any format, Brien. So I don't have him in any draft team, and I don't have him in standard. He's going to be over 600 grand in standard by this week. And I moved him on in round 4 for 330, I think, for someone else. So I have really had a massive bed shit there, where I should have stuck to my guns and should have stuck to my gut and reaped the sweet, sweet, sweet rewards of a 4-try Tommy Talau effort. But anyway, not
Even
to
if
be.
you're
Still,
even if you're not, mate, Jess Surgis is. So
well, that's true. Yeah. Credit to Jess. She was the one that got me onto it. So all credit to Jess Surgis, and we'll give her many credit in the NRLW comp upcoming, and probably the Bundy Mixer, I would dare say, Brien, as well, as a little sneaky one there. Last game of the round here was the Bulldogs versus the Eels. Maika Sivo was a hamstring rule out pre-game. Jacob Preston looks like a fairly significant ankle or foot injury, and Jermaine Hopgood with a back concern here, Brien. I guess Maika Sivo was in that sort of low to moderate grade hamstring, I believe, wasn't he?
yeah, low grade. So they say he's a chance for next week. And I think that's probably purely because he suffered it earlier in the week at training. So I put out the usual 2 to 4 week return to play. Usually best case for those minor hamstring issues is around 10 days post, which obviously usually puts you at that 2-week return to play with when games are. So because he suffered it earlier in the week, he is a chance for next weekend. Once again, I mean, we've had a lot of hamstring issues this year. Do you run the risk of naming him for next week with the re-injury risk? I'll let the Eels deal with that risk there. Jacob Preston with the ankle/foot injury. I think the thing to make clear here, there's so many times where a guy struggles to weight bear off a field, has to get, carted off the field, where I'm like, yeah, that guy's cooked. So like you hear us talk about all the time, like with those syndesmosis injuries. Yeah, it's a 6 to 8 week injury until proven otherwise, because it's so strongly more than likely going to be that. With the way this mechanism was, his foot rolling in, stretching the ligaments on the outside, that can be extremely, extremely painful and not have major implications for a long recovery time. We've seen guys over and over again have that happen, provided he avoids a fracture. He could be back in 2-3 weeks. So it just really depends on that fracture. They said it was a suspected fracture. If it's a fracture, you're looking at least 4 to 6 weeks, up to about 8 weeks. So, yeah, scans will tell us the full story, but I just think there is some optimism there. So don't freak out if you're a Preston owner just yet, because he could potentially even be back to you for you best case in that round 16 bye, which would be huge. Then Jermaine Hopgood with his back. Apparently he had some like nerve spasmy stuff going on from Origin in his back that he just aggravated again. And the coach said he even questioned himself for playing him. Trent Barrett said maybe that wasn't the best idea. So I think they're going to deload him this week with training and stuff like that and try and get that back to settle down. But it's not anything too much to worry about there.
Yep. Last ones we want to give a special shout out to. These are probably ones that'll maybe even get a run in the Golden Sponge at the end of the year for the end of season awards. But Tristan Sailor coming off syndesmosis surgery, and Jake Granville playing the best part of 80 minutes with a bicep tear as well, Brien. I think you want to just go into a little bit of detail with these two guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to shout out, like, Tristan Sailor coming back in 4 weeks from syndesmosis surgery. That is just bonkers. Like, I know I kind of put it up and I say the record is 5 weeks and he came back in 4 weeks and people are like, who gives a shit? Like, it's a 1 week extra. But, like, this is a surgery that an injury that 10 years ago or just over, the surgery used to involve a screw. You have to have the screw put in, then wait for a certain time, then have the screw taken out. So 2 surgical procedures, a whole, bunch of rehab, a really tough sort of recovery. And it was like 6 months to come back from. This is like 10, 15 years ago. And then we cut it down. We started using the syndesmosis tightrope, which is like just effectively a synthetic cord that goes between the 2 lower leg bones just above the ankle. Started using that, and guys are coming back at around sort of 10 to 12 weeks. And that was even as recently as like 2017, 18. We've seen guys consistently come back in 10 to 12 weeks. Then we've brought it down to 6 to 8 weeks. Like, guys in the last 3-4 years have come back relatively consistently. It's about 95% of guys come back in 6 to 8 weeks. We've had a few come back at 5 weeks, and now we've had someone come back at 4 weeks. It is crazy to me. Like, I think not many people would be interested in actually watching one of those surgeries happen. But if you see the surgery and you see what the joint that it has to hold together, you understand what that joint gets put through it as a football player. It is mental to come back in 4 weeks. I wouldn't say Tristan Sailor was at his best, but yeah, just crazy. And then Jake Granville, a biceps rupture, you lose at least 50% of the strength in your bicep, in your elbow when that happens. And for a hooker, like, I think I had a lot of people like comment after I put it up being like, oh, I actually gave him a lot of shit yelling at the TV for his poor service during that game. But now I'm like being a bit nicer about it. And I'm like, yeah, like, he wouldn't have had very good use of his right arm or his left arm, whichever one it was, at all. And he's having to pass the ball off the deck for 80 minutes. Like, yeah, those 2 efforts. Yeah, I think the first one, Tristan Sailor, obviously props to the Broncos and their rehab team, because that is great, but also just props to the medical community for this, just like the advancement in the surgical procedure. But yeah, Jakey Granville, that is just mental. And yeah, I know Granville can struggle with his service at times, but it's not usually that bad. So cut him some slack.
Yeah, 46 tackles as well, Brien, with only 6 misses. I mean, it's a pretty big Herculean effort if you've ever seen one on a footy field there. So props to Jakey Granville. He's been an epic servant for the North Queensland Cowboys for many, 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 many years. That's a wrap up of the injuries, Brien. So we're going to go straight to Patreon questions now. Patreon.com/NRL Physio. Question number 1 is regarding Tom Flegler. So I guess Patreon question here is, what's going on here? Like, sounds like a really severe injury from a shoulder concern. There's been nerve damage spoken about in the media. I guess your post recently shed some light on his prognosis as well, Brien. But do you want to just go deep into Tom Flegler here? He's had there's a lot of questions here and not a lot of sound answers at this point in time, but it's all a bit concerning at present, that's for sure.
It's a very rare injury. Very rare injury. I think even the Dolphins medical staff sort of said it's a new one for them. I certainly, in my time, I've probably only seen 2, and they weren't even probably this severe as such, where we're now, what are we, 10, 12 weeks down the track and still quite significant concerns. So I think I'll just run through initially kind of what we're dealing with here. So we're dealing with a nerve injury to the brachial plexus, reportedly. Now, the brachial plexus is the group of nerves that come out of your neck, go through your trap, so the area between your neck and your shoulder, and then they run down and they provide the electrical signal for your muscles in your arm, elbow, forearm, and down into your hand and your fingers. So effectively, when you hear about like a burner or a stinger, that is like either a stretch injury or an impact injury to the brachial plexus. And because it runs between that soft spot, that trap between your neck and your shoulder, that's where a lot of collisions happen during tackles, right? So that's how we often get these burners and stingers, or potentially the head gets pushed from one side to the other, and that can either compress or stretch that brachial plexus. So the most minor of injuries to this brachial plexus is a stinger or a burner. So similar sort of thing here where you see guys, they momentarily lose use of their arm. Their arm is hanging down by their side. They're trying to make a fist. They lose strength. They get pins and needles. They get numbness. That is the temporary version of this injury. So it happens, it seems so significant, but a bit like the funny bone, injury that we spoke about a few weeks ago. It's like that's what a nerve injury is. It's a nerve impact or stretch injury that's temporary, and it recovers really quickly. Now, the major version of this and the most significant version of this is Simon Dwyer. Like any footy fan who's probably 15 years old probably knows the story of Simon Dwyer. So he copped a knock to that soft spot in between his neck and his shoulder. He effectively tore the nerves that come out of his neck off the spine. So he's completely torn that brachial plexus, and he effectively had massive loss of function in his arm to the point where it was in a sling. And last I checked, it was still in a sling, even now, 10, 15 years later. So that is the most major end of it. So we've got minor end, stinger, burner, major end, tears, permanent function loss, just catastrophic stuff, career-ending stuff. Now, the important thing to note here is nerves generally don't have as good a healing capacity as things like muscles, tendons, ligaments, these more common, injuries that we see in footy. And the other thing to mention is that there's only a finite time for healing to occur. So it usually has to happen within 12 to 18 months of an injury or after surgery, because nerves just after a certain amount of time, if a muscle hasn't had signal for 12 to 18 months, the muscle just goes, well, stuff it. Like it almost dies in some, and I know that sounds severe, but it's because it is. It literally is like, well, I haven't had energy. I haven't had electricity for 18 months. I'm done. And it's gone, and it's really hard to get back. So then the last thing I think, which is important here, which is probably the most concerning part of it, is when damage is kind of this bad or bad enough that we're talking about these things, we're never really talking about a recovery back to 100% with these kind of things, even with surgery. It's more like how close can we get to normal? How close can we get back to 100%? And that's probably the scary thing about nerves, where they're different to other things like muscles and those kind of things. You can, strengthen a muscle to stronger than it was before. You can't really do that with a nerve. You can't get the nerve back to 100% if the damage is where we're at. So we'll talk about Flegler now. So he got hit, it stretched the nerve, and that nerve kind of shut down, a bit like a burner or a stinger. Unfortunately, it just hasn't woken back up all that well. So he's had some nerve conduction tests recently, and it's saying that the nerve isn't dead, but it's just not activating enough. It's not giving enough to the upper limb or the arm to protect him when he's back on the field from like further damage, from like really significant, like nail in the coffin injury for his career. So they're not ready to send him back out there. But he has been training. Like, he's doing quite well. I think the Finns have said, if you look at him in the gym for so many different movements, you wouldn't even know he's got an injury. It's only in certain points. And I've heard it described to me as he's pretty much at like 75%. He's doing relatively well, but there are just certain positions where that arm and that shoulder just don't want to work all that well. He even tried to get medical clearance to play a few weeks ago. So I think where we're at here is he's very unlikely to play this year, because those two nerve conduction tests have shown that nerve just isn't waking up enough. Next year's a bit up in the air as well, because, look, he may need nerve transfer surgery here, which Simon Dwyer did have. So he got nerves taken from his diaphragm, from his back, from his forearm, and they like transplanted them to where those torn nerves were to try and get some healing happening. And if that nerve of Flegler's doesn't wake up enough, they may have to try and transfer a nerve from somewhere else to try and, regenerate that signal. That's going to be a lengthy recovery. Like, it's not something that's really measured in, like, a lot of the time, grade 2 hamstring injury, 4 to 6 weeks. This is really tough. It's a tough one. Like, it could be 6 months, it could be 12 months, it could be 18 months. Yeah, it's a really, really tough one. So I think unlikely to play this year. Next year's up in the air a little bit, pending on if surgery is required. The good news is what the Dolphins have indicated so far is that they're optimistic and fairly confident / hopeful that it won't come to medical retirement, because I know there was a bit of chat around about that. But like, I think the thing here, James, is even though it's a slight possibility for an injury that seemed minor at the start, like it was, I think Wayne said in the post-match presser, he's just copped a knock to it. It's probably an AC joint injury. And now we're here talking about 12, 18 months recovery. It's just as a Finns fan, it's especially just makes me super, super sad. But this guy's 24. He's 24 and he's having to deal with this. I mean, I'm sure you're on the same wavelength, but it's just, it's a really big story, I think, injury-wise.
Certainly one that it just doesn't happen very often either, Brian. So from that point of view, just how infrequent it is makes it interesting. I suppose on the nerve transfer side of things, for the nerds at home, I guess some of the rationale behind that is they have a thing called like neural sprouting. So that's where like, I guess, undamaged nerve tissue like sprouts to like damaged tissue to try to reinnovate it, to try and compensate it. So it's kind of like a bit of an adaptation that the body can make to sometimes compensate for those things. But as soon as even the discussion of nerve transplant surgery, that is very scary as a prospect to me. So I hope it's not that severe, and hope that, there might be some things that happen with time there that might be his best ally and that might be his best pursuit. But yeah, not a lot of, I guess, specific knowledge about what nerve is impacted, what level, what part of the plexus. There's so many different things that sort of feed into these conversations, Brian. But I guess the nerve conduction studies, if they're not showing, progressive reinnovation, that's a bit of a worry as to prognosis this far down the track. So we'll cross our fingers and cross everything for Tom Flegler. Hopefully, that's not a severe, lifelong limiting thing. Because I know in Simon Dwyer's situation, he's still got no use of that right arm, does he? I think he's got a non-functional arm still. So, like you said, that is the worst case scenario. So crossing everything for Tommy Flegler. Question 2, Brian, is around Ryan Papenhuyzen. I think the aim was for him to return round 16, round 17. What would be your expectations on his return? Would you buy him in round 16 if he's named? Fullback's a bit of a conundrum at the moment for Supercoach, so it's a good question, this one.
Yeah, really good question. I think the first thing I want to clarify there, and I did clarify it over on Patreon too, is that there was the report this week from Papenhuyzen himself. He was on a podcast kind of earlier in the week where he said, "Oh, look, I've just started running again. It shouldn't take me longer than a month to come back, maybe 3 to 4 weeks." So the way I saw that as 3 to 4 weeks is, I think when they would have recorded it to sort of 3 weeks post that, would have been a couple of days before. It would have been a couple of days before round 16. Sorry, after round 16. So I'm still expecting around that round 16 to 17 for Papenhuyzen is my expectation. I think in terms of which it's going to be, like I've heard that the Storm are pushing for round 16. Potentially the talk was early on round 15 as well. I just think round 15 might be a little bit too soon. Maybe they name him on an extended bench and see how he progresses during the week. But I think round 16, there's definitely optimism there. If not round 17, it'd be an absolute lock, I think. So if he's named round 16, I don't really have too many concerns. As I said, a broken bone's a broken bone. He said himself on his podcast, and it's exactly how I feel about it as well. I'm not really worried about his ankle. It's his knee. He said, that's the main issue, is that he's had to deload, and that has a minor effect on his ankle, but it's that knee that he's had troubles with. So he's not someone who I'd jump on straight away, though. I think there's more than enough options in terms of, like, even if you want to flip a CT dub fullback dual that you own, say a Ruben Garrick or something like that, down to fullback and buy another high upside CTW at that point in time. I just think, and then on top of that, like, he only plays round 16. Like, for that, I think Teddy is a much better buy for someone like that. Even Chance, potentially. Like, Chance is lighting it up at the moment. The Warriors are doing well. So, I mean, look, as our Supercoach expert, mate, where are you with that? I'm kind of leaning away from it as a buy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it wouldn't be on my radar. Looking at his draw, round 15 is in New Zealand, and then they got a 5-day turnaround to round 16 against the Finns at Suncorp. Notorious a pretty good stomping ground, Suncorp, for Ryan Pappenhausen. So I'd probably put my money on a 16 return than a 15 return. To be fair, that's probably a more likely scenario, I'd reckon. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of Supercoach prospects, though. It wouldn't be on my radar at this point in time. I think I'd probably take someone down and have a shot at a different centre wing who might do 16 and 19, because 19 is so hard to cover. I'm trying to hit both of those rounds if I possibly can, with a few players in mind. So that'd be the way I'd look at it. Question number 3 is around Clint Gutherson. Looks like he's wearing a polka dot suit every week. Looks like he's getting sort of cupping on, a variety of places on his body. What is the deal with cupping, Brian? Does it work? What the hell is it? Give us the good news here. Give us the physio nerd
boy.
chat for the Patreon question here.
Oh boy. Cupping. The first thing I'll say is I don't use cupping, so I apologize to anybody out there who is listening who does use cupping, and if I get something wrong here. But the way I always, when patients ask me, what does cupping do? It's reportedly supposed to suck blood or fluid out of an area. So it kind of, as it sucks, it breaks up little capillaries and causes bleeding, which I think you see in those like round red or purple dots, like bruising. And then the body is supposed to then replenish that kind of blood that's, or toxic fluid that's been lost with fresh, fresh blood and healthy blood to kind of try and help the area heal as such. Yeah, look, the thing I'll say is that I think that's kind of what they think it does, or what they say it does. My biggest thing with it, and we all know I love a good evidence base, James. I love reading my papers all night, every night. But what I will say is that practically I just have not heard of or seen, whether that be in practice or in the evidence, seen much evidence that it does a whole lot. The thing with pro athletes like this is the juice is worth the squeeze often for things like this, because they have unlimited resources. Like for them to spend $100, let's say it's $100 to go and get cupping, it's not a big deal to them. And if it gets them 1%, 2% improvement, fantastic. But if it doesn't, then they like $100, then whatever. But for us, everyday human beings, $100 or something that might only get us 2%, 3%, not really worth it. So that's kind of where I sit with it. James, as someone in hospital, I'm sure there's not a set of suction cups rolling around the wards at any point.
No, there's not. Probably good for everyone there. I guess when you look at the research, Brian, like it actually doesn't increase blood flow to the muscles. Like that's been a myth that's been disproven.
There you go.
A lot of research shows it doesn't flush out toxins. It doesn't release fascia. It doesn't necessarily improve recovery, but it gives you some like cool little hickey looking bruises. So like, I guess if you like a neck hickey, it's not my thing, but if it's your thing and you like that, then I guess like it's probably got its place. But different strokes for different folks, Brian, would be the way I'd look at cupping. So yeah, not a lot of good stuff on the science front there. But again, like I guess if you're looking for like a temporary hypoalgesic effect that allows someone to play or be, slightly better athletically, then fair shout would be where I sort of leave it at there from that point of view. Ezra Mam is another one who looks like he's been carrying an injury of some sort. Is there anything that we're missing here? It doesn't seem like he's been at his best lately, Brian. I don't know so much. I don't think Ezra Mam's been going that badly, to be honest. I don't think there's anything obvious injury wise that stands out to me. Do you think there's anything?
He's just copped a few in-game knocks, I think. Like there was a game, I think we've talked about him twice in maybe the last 6 weeks in terms of like copping an in-game knock. I think he had a shoulder about 6 weeks ago, and then he had like a lower limb, like a knee or an ankle. So I think they were just in-game knocks. I haven't seen anything to suggest that he's still carrying something. But there's been, he's lost Adam Reynolds in his halves partner. The Bronx have lost guys to Origin, these kind of things. So I think add that into a few knocks. I think that's all there is to it. But as we've spoken about with the old tinfoil hat on with the way the Bronx have treated injuries this year, there could be more to it potentially, but not enough that I'm seeing so far.
Next question, Brian's about Bradman Best, RTS, or AJ Brimo being around a 15 or 16 return to play. Are any of them a likely scenario for those rounds? I'm sort of trying to rack my brain. Like, it seems a bit early for RTS and AJ, but maybe Bradman Best might be the most likely out of those three. Is that a fair call?
Yeah, Bradman's a chance for this week. So he's pushing to return in round 15. RTS is aiming for round 16. But once again, it's a significant hammy, so you never know. And I think AJ's a little bit further along. He'll kind of probably be, I haven't checked AJ. I've probably got it in the casualty ward. So to the Patreon who's listening to this, just jump on the casualty ward and I'll have my expected around there. But I'm pretty sure AJ's a little bit further. But yeah, Bradman's the best chance. So could be a sneaky little point of difference if he's able to come back and doesn't get picked for Origin.
This question's about Jesse Arthurs with his jaw fracture. Have we heard much on his return date from the jaw fracture? I can't remember how long ago that was now, Brian. It was
it's been a while.
Like,
it's been a while.
About ballpark, hasn't it?
Yeah, so round 16, I think, is the locked and loaded date, but round 15 is a chance. So that's as simple as that for that one.
So that's where we're up to there. And then lucky last from the Patreon questions is give us your top 5 injuries in Origin that you've seen in your, I guess, your viewing days that people have played through.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we enjoyed, I flicked the message to you as soon as it came through earlier in the week, and we enjoyed sort of going back and forth on a few. I will say that, like, there's injuries like Bobby Lindner. I think he, broke his leg and these kind of things. And that was just before our time. So we don't really have memory of that. So there's no disrespect to him. But the top 5 injuries in Origin that players pushed through, it makes for a pretty impressive list. So at number 5, we got Mick DeVere with the staples in the head, mate. That's probably one of my earliest Origin memories, especially from an injury perspective, as someone I don't think who had any want to become a physio at that point. But yeah, that was the talk at school big time, wasn't it? Like, how a guy could play through getting staples in his head.
Oh, it's just so epic because, like, one, I don't think many people had seen a staple gun used for like rapid stitching and like rapid wound closure. And then 2, the staple gun getting caught mid staple was just pretty iconic as well. So like Mick DeVere's trying to hang his eyelid out there, the staple gun's like getting caught up. It just wasn't. It wasn't a great look just to sum it all up. But he just took it like an absolute weapon, Mick DeVere, didn't he? Just barely even flinched, even though he was getting his face ripped apart in an open wound. But yeah, that was tough. That was really tough. I think JT's the next one, Brian. Like, we saw that. We see it every year. It comes up with him kicking the conversion with the torn rotator cuff, but that was another belter, hey?
Oh, mate, for him to, because I think it ended up being supraspinatus and infraspinatus torn off the bone, which had 2 rotator. So you got 4 rotator cuff muscles. Your rotator cuff is just such an important, group of muscles for shoulder function and stability. So to have 2 of those, and probably 2 of the more major ones, completely torn off your shoulder blade, to play out that game, the pain that he would have been in, to then, and we talk about the conversion, but to still be out there and just fronting up and making tackles is like significant enough too in that arena. So, but then to put all that pain aside, and that was a tough kick. Yeah, that still is one of, with my like understanding of what I've seen some patients present to me as with torn cuffs. And so seeing that, it was, like that definitely sits there. Number 3, we've got Josh Morris with the PCL rupture, mate. Once again, another really famous one that we see all the time. He suffered the injury, was down on the side of the field getting tended to. Queensland make a break, and he just hops up, chases back. If there's ever been a play that was New South Wales spirit, dare I say it, that was it, because that was insane. That was during Queensland's run of just like ridiculous, 8 in a row, never forget kind of situation. And he's just got back, tackled GI of all people, I think it was. So yeah, like, we didn't know how bad it was at the time, but looking back, that's one of the all-time New South Wales plays, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That was one that will always live on in infamy in everyone's memories, and it was a really, really good play by Josh Morris. And he was always good at Origin level, like Josh and Brad. Like, I thought they'd always front up for the Blues, and they didn't always have the strongest teams through those years either, despite running into an all-time Queensland team. Number 2, we had Willie Tonga here, Brian, and I think people might forget this one because it sort of happened. How many years ago was it now? It was like 07-ish or 08-ish. I can't remember exactly when it was.
2010,
Like,
I think, or somewhere
was
around
it
there. Yeah.
2010?
Yep.
God, my memory is shocking. But the significance of his shoulder injury, when it happened, went in at halftime. He clearly was no good, but he just got the nod from Mal Meninga and Darren Lockyer to needle it and tape it, play on through it. And then he had it recode after that game and missed the rest of the season for Para, I think, where he was playing at the time. So massive, like very severe shoulder injury there. Do you remember much detail around what he actually sustained there, Brian? I just remember it being a severe dislocation was my understanding. So he probably would have had some soft tissue involvement there, I'd assume, as well.
Yeah, this is testing my memory, this one, because I can't remember whether he had surgery or whether he like missed 8 weeks and then like delayed the surgery to the end of the year. But either way, like he did have reconstruction surgery at some point. I know he missed a significant time. Like it was just, he dislocated it and he was absolutely gone. You could see the whole game. His shoulder was hanging on by a thread. He was marking up on, and the thing that amazes me the most, Mark Gasnier, prime Mark Gasnier, he was marking up on, like, which, yeah, that is no mean feat. And yeah, and it to the point where it became a catch cry for Queensland when they were in defence in years to come. They would yell out Tonga, and that would kind of be like their thing of like, okay, we've got to defend tough here, boys, like Willie Tonga did all those years ago. So, like for something like that to kind of, you've got like the Queenslander or the cattle dog cry, like this kind of thing, to have something like Tonga for a guy who they knew how bad that injury was and how much he put on the line for that team, that is really, really cool. Number 1, mate, like this is, I don't know whether this is just us being blokes and we hear this injury, but it has to be Peter Wallace, number 1, played through a ruptured testicle for more than a half of footy in Origin, comes in at halftime, can't sit down comfortably, and he doesn't really know what's wrong, but he's just like, stuff it. Like, I'm going to go back out there anyway. Goes back out, has to have surgery the next day. Like, that is just like we talk about it. I think Tommy did it a couple of years ago. Chanel Harris-Tavita as well. In an NRL game, that's enough. But yeah, to do that in Origin, to come back in at halftime and be like, I can't sit down. Yeah, that easy number 1 for me personally.
No questions from me there, Brian. It's just got to be Peter Wallace to play 40 minutes with a ruptured nut. I mean, come on, like it's game set match. Like anyone can raise any injury, and best Pete Wallace goes, yeah, but did you rupture your nut? And it just wins every argument. Like that's the end of the conversation. It's like, oh, how hard are you? It's like, well, played 40 minutes with like my testicle that exploded on me. Like there's no coming back from that. There's no debating that. There's no arguing that. It's just Peter Wallace by the length of the street. So yeah, shout out to Peter Wallace there. That's one of the all-time efforts that I feel like it's been a bit forgotten, Brian. It doesn't really get mentioned all that much, but God, at the time, I remember just thinking that how is that possible? How is that humanly possible? So,
Mate,
epic.
you can't be getting that needled up. I can tell you right.
Nah.
Yeah.
Big
But
needle,
yeah,
man.
that was geez, it needed to be a really accurate needle for some of us. Anyway, that was really fun. If we missed any, please let us know. Send me a message. But let's go straight to Supercoach. We've been here a while. James, hit me with your score for this week. What are your trade plans? I think we're probably both trying to hold back on trades a little bit now because we're running a bit low, but both teams in pretty good spots, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So my score this week, Brian, was 11-17. So I think that's pretty mid, to be honest. I don't feel like that's a big score or a bad score. It feels a bit mid, but I was one player short with David Armstrong being out, and I had Jeremy Marshall-King, Sam Walker, Terrell May, Joey Manu and Dom Young on bye. So it was a pretty tricky one for me to cover. So I think given that I scored well last week, this week's a bit mid. I'm pretty okay with that because I think you got to look at the bye period as a collective rather than a week-to-week thing. So I'm not too bad on that. I traded in Dave Fifita this week and Latrell. Latrell's a tricky one. It looks for all money. He's probably going to play Origin too. But then again, Brien, it could be a coaching bed shit. We just don't know for sure that Latrell will get picked. For whatever reason, he's not popular in certain circles. I don't understand it as a Queensland fan, but I love it every time I see him not get picked. I hope from a Supercoach point of view, he doesn't get picked because he's been lighting it up. His involvements have been great. Whenever he's playing, he's Supercoach points everywhere. He's got to be someone that you have in your team at the moment. So I looped Latrell this week for his score, which is an easy one because I was one short. So I had a free chop at it anyway. My backup was Nick Meaney, funnily enough, and he didn't score too bad. But anyway, I took Latrell when the money was there and the points were there. This week, in terms of what I'm doing, so I've got a couple of options here, Brien, that I want your advice on as well. So I've got the 3 Bulldogs front rowers on bye. So I've got Sam Hughes, Max King, and Paisa Famasuli, the absolute point-scoring weapon that he is in my team. I need to find a front row this week, otherwise I'm going to be one short there. So that's probably one trade. And I'm looking at Samuel Finu, or one of my personal favourites that I always tell myself I won't go there every year. But he is priced nicely at 360 grand, I think. He's front row and second row dual position, and he is playing for the Redcliffe Dolphins, who are a bit light on in the middle. And I'm talking about our favourite thirst trap of a Supercoach player of years, Tafita Pangai Jr. So he's another one, depending on if he gets named for the Finns this week. At that price point, he might be a very good little trade in that I can just try to shoot some upside for. And the Dolphins also have, as we know, Brien, extremely good buy coverage as well. So he could just be a useful number for me just to interchange between front row and second row for a minimum of fuss there. So they're my options. The other one is Eli Katoa at second row. If I have enough cash, it'll be touch and go if I can upgrade someone to Eli Katoa. But then the other one is Lehigh Hopgood. Basement price, fullback only. Manly covers 16 and 19. I don't think Turbo's going to be back before 19, is he? So I think he's probably someone worth considering. But he might be someone I move next week because Drinkwater won't play 16. So I might look at that next week, even if it costs me a little bit of money straight out of the gate. So I might well do that because I'm eyeing Jermaine Asako in round 16. He's got a break even at 91. So I think Jermaine's probably a next week pickup rather than a this week pickup. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of just trying to be a bit of a tight ass and cash grab a little bit more money with Jermaine. If he can just be in the mid sixes, I'll be very, very happy to get him at that price point there. But a few options there in terms of the plan, Brien. Again, I sort of saved 3 trades in 13, made 2 last week. I'm probably going to need to make 2 for the next few rounds to have enough numbers for 19 and 16. I think I haven't done the maths on 16 and 19 where I'm sitting, but I'll probably need to keep trading until round 19. And hopefully by then I can save about 6 or 7, I think is probably my plan. And then just hold on for dear life for the last few rounds and just trade big injuries if and when. I'm holding Nico through this period as well. I was thinking about trading him. I just get the feeling that he's probably not going to get named for Origin 2, so I don't think Nico's on my trade agenda anymore. He's going to be a hold for me through the period, so a few risky things, but I've just got to do a bit more of an analysis about where I sit for round 16 and round 19. Round 19 is really tricky, especially. Like I always think, if you've got about 13 for round 19, that's probably not a bad shout. I don't think you need the full quota for round 19. If you can just get your captain right and just get a pretty so-so score, I think round 19 is probably the bullet you got to take. So you got me in the points this week, Brien. You're a better bloke than me this week. What did you do this week, and what are your plans for the bye period moving forward?
Yeah, mate, 11.50 for me this week. Pretty good week, despite a fucking horrible captaincy call in Scotty Drinkwater, which scored me 90 points when my other options, were Fafita or even Latrell. So I traded in Dave Fafita and Eli Katoa. I'm pretty happy with both of those trades at the moment. Mate, to your point, Nico now, after the way Origin went, is an absolute hold because he's probably a number in round 19. Sharks play round 19. So I think he's your captaincy option in round 19, 1,000%. Trades this week, I am down low. I'm at 14 trades. So I've still got a couple in mind. Of course I do. Even though I'm probably not going to trade. I'll say that now on Monday night. The ones I'm eyeing off are Galvin to Cody Walker. I just think Cody at halfback, it's kind of forcing him to get involved in the game a little bit more, and he's looking a lot better. He plays 16 and 19, provided that he doesn't get picked for Origin, which I don't think he will. He's pretty cheap. He'd be mid 500s, I think, which would be relatively a straight swap for Galvin. So I'm looking at Cody. Mate, the other one is Isaac Tungo. Like, I've been watching him a lot more since I owned him. Worst trade of my year by far. He's lost like 300 grand. So I probably can't trade him because he's just got more upside than that. But I've never seen a guy run more decoys as a center than this guy. He's often running. Like, sometimes he even runs the unders line for the edge second rower to do the wrap around, like, the back. And I'm just going, are you kidding me? Like, what are you doing, Isaac Tungo? Like, killing me. So he's the other one I'm looking to. Guys like, because I need 19 cover. I'm sweet for 16. I've already got 14 for round 16. So I don't need to worry about 16 now. Unless there's something like, do I want to do a Latrell to Teddy if Latrell gets picked for Origin and I want Teddy as a captain in that round potentially is the only thing I'm thinking about doing. But I'm eyeing off Ronaldo Militalo. I think DWZ and Mars Hugh are all cheap. Another guy to keep an eye on, Alex Johnston. He's about to become super cheap. He scored like 8 on the weekend, which is horrible. But surely if the Rabbits start to show something, like between that round 16 and 19 is when I'd be eyeing him off, like round 17 or 18. Hopefully the 8 rolls out of his average and he's at about 400, even lower, 400K, and you can pick him up. But I think, like you, I'd probably want to hold off for Asako and bring him in, or the new Manly fullback. I think you've sold me on him. He looks like a pretty good option. I don't think Manly are going to be rushing Tommy Turbo back. So there's some really good options there, man. I've said I'm not going to trade, but if I can get it to 6 by, like you're saying, if I have 6 left after round 19, I'm pretty happy with that to just roll with whatever happens, because I think the only person I need is Cleary. I said last week I'd have 12 and get Cleary, but yeah, mate, like, it's just going to change every week. Probably in a couple of weeks, I'll say, as long as I've got 2 trades left to bring in Cleary, that'll be fine. But yeah, man, trading's fun. So
I just wonder, Brien, like, on the Cody stuff, I don't know about this. This is probably just like a stupid take in my head, but if I was selecting that team, it would be Cody at 6, Latrell at centre, just to go guns blazing down the Queensland right edge defence, because we were vulnerable there in game 1. Like, there was points to be had through Daly, through Jeremiah Nanai, through Val Holmes. I think if you're going to really, and that's where we got carved last year in game 3, where Cody and Bradman Best just went absolutely troppo down that channel. And we had no answer for that. We got absolutely rinsed there in game 3. If I was a New South Wales fan, if I was a coach, if I was anyway involved in that setup, I'd be thinking, how can I get out that Queensland right edge? Who are the best people down the left side? Cody Walker and Latrell is definitely that combination for me. You can throw Bradman Best in if you want, whatever, doesn't really matter. I just think if you're going to be a chance of winning game 2 and game 3, I think you've got to pick a team to do that. And I just wonder if Cody comes into considerations there, whether it's like a Moses Cody combo. I just don't think he's that far away from selection, because I think he had the calf rule out, so we didn't really know how close he was to the squad in game 1. I don't know. It's such a good price though to go straight from Galvin to him, and it's a no-brainer because of Cody's upside. But I just wonder, is Cody worth a sniff for Origin? I don't know. It's a really tricky one where him and Latrell sit in terms of priority for the New South Wales squad. Because I like your play. I just, like, if I was New South Wales, man, I'd be looking at those guys pretty hard. It'd be risky, but like, you got to win out from here. I think you got to try to go, well, who's going to be my best 6 that I can score points? Because even game 1 for New South Wales, their shape looked shocking, didn't it? Like, I know they were missing a guy, but even between 9, 6, 7, and 1, the shape, the connection, it wasn't there. And the only time it looked a good shake last year was game 3 in that dead rubber, where we got hosed. And I guess the consistent one there was Cody Walker outside. Was he outside Cleary or Moses in that game? I think he's outside Cleary, wasn't he?
Yeah.
In game
Oh,
3?
no,
Was it
Moses. Moses. Yeah.
Moses. So I don't know. I wonder if Cody's just a little bit more of a look in there than we realise. Because the thing is, Jerome Luai just goes crack off his left foot all day, every day, and doesn't really give his ball to anyone outside him, really. I just wonder if Cody's going to be the one that just unlocks that left-hand side and can really target where Queensland are most vulnerable. That'd be my only sort of thinking with the Cody Walker plan. I don't know.
Mate, I think it's
Too deep.
good. It's exactly my concerns with Cody, to be honest. I think, that's the one thing that's turning me away from it. But Madge is just so hard to tell. I just don't know what he's going to do. So, yeah, maybe I hold off on that. I think the break even might make it a little bit hard, but maybe I just downgrade and swallow the price rise of Cody. I don't know. But I agree with you. I think as a Queenslander, I would be a lot more worried if it was Mitch Moses, Cody Walker, and then Latrell on that left hand, like Cody Walker Latrell combo on that left for sure. All right, guys. I think that's about it for this week. Long one tonight, but I think, the Walsh and Flegler chats have really blown us out of proportion, but they were two pretty big ones. James, have a good week. If you like what we do, head to patreon.com/NRL Physio. As always, mate, I'll talk to you next week. Hopefully we can maintain. Hey, everyone who is listening who is very interested in our health, we are both relatively healthy at this point in time. So there's 1 week we can tick off. Hopefully we can keep this run going into winter.
Yeah, we'll stop getting rinsed in the YouTube comments being like, boys, get some immune systems and like get healthier, you muppets. So guys, we're working on it. Our immune systems are kicking in. We're going well. I'm COVID negative now. Things are looking up, Brian. I'll see you next
We're
Sunday.
going good. We're drinking all of our vitamin C, don't you? All our orange juice and things like that. But have a good week, guys, and up the mighty Redcliffe Dolphins.